Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, guys. Today I have an amazing guest on, and Bridget is going to be very sad that she's missing this. Miss Lesley Ann Warren, who is an actress, a singer, a dancer, and now a producer. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to talk to you about all things midlife and your career. And I wanted to start with the most recent. So you have just finished a movie called Lady, which you are producing. How did that come about?
Well, pre-COVID, an actress named Devon Seidel, whose story it is, contacted me to act in it. And I read the script and we had lots of talks about the structure of the script and then casting ideas. And at a certain point, I turned to my manager and I said, I should be producing this along. There's another producer on the film, but I was more actively involved in the casting at that point and some of the script construct. And he said, yes, why don't you talk to Devon about it? So I did. And she was like, please, yes. So I came on as a producer, a co-producer. I have there's, as I said, there's another producer, Robin Conley, who is producing as well. And it's been a very challenging and fascinating experience. It's a difficult story. It's a true story. And it's about, actually it's Devon's story and she talks about it. So her mom had the BRCA gene, and her aunt got breast cancer, passed away, and her sister had breast cancer. And she finds out that she has the gene, and she decides to do a double mastectomy and hysterectomy prophylactically. And all that ensues as a result of that, how it affects her and her journey and her mother and her family in it. And so I know it sounds very, very serious, but it is, but it also has, there are some magical aspects to it. I don't want to give it away too much, but there's, right. And it's also, it also has some light comedic moments. So it was, I mean, we just finished it like a week ago. So we're not even into post-production yet, but yeah, it's been an amazing experience.
Have you always wanted to produce, or did this just seem to come at the right time?
It just came at the right time. And about 3 years ago, my manager, Orrin Siegel, had sent me 5 different books to read and said, if any of those appeal to you, why don't we try to get the option and maybe produce it? Well, one of them did appeal to me tremendously. It was another true story, very funny though, and very relevant. And I optioned the material, and then I brought it to the book, and then I brought it to a dear friend of mine, Bobby Moresco, who is a 2-time Academy Award-winning writer for Crash and $1 Million Baby. And he flipped for the book. And so we decided to jointly produce this movie. And so we are hoping to produce it in November. These things take, as you can see, 3 years is kind of short on the development in hell, development hell routine.
Add COVID into that, and
yeah, it's just been exactly, so we're hoping to shoot in November, and we have a wonderful cast that we're beginning to assemble.
When is Lady going to be coming out? Do they have a time?
Oh, no, like I said, we finished it last week. We have to go into post, we have to edit it, put it together, and then because it's a real indie, it'll start the festival circuit, and hopefully get picked up for distribution. That's how it works in the independent film market.
Okay. Well, I'm excited.
It's a while. I mean, in answer to your question, it's a while.
But I do think it's very relevant because there are so many women now that the BRCA gene is out there being tested. So many women who have relatives are saying, should I get the test? What's going to happen? But yet in every family, there's humor in every experience. There's good, there's bad. So
yeah. I mean, exactly. And with that's my cat. One of them.
That's fine. Mine, I have the door closed. So-
You're smart. Yeah, it's an incredibly important subject and very relevant. And hopefully it will give courage to people that are facing this kind of incredibly difficult, challenging decision.
Definitely. Well, I look forward to seeing that when it comes out. One of the things when I was doing some research on you that I have noticed is that you, in this stage of life, are getting selective about what you want to do. You only want to do those things that kind of lighten you up. How did that come up? I mean, were you very, wanting to achieve everything when you were younger and it's kind of mellowed, or do you just at that stage where if I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it?
Well, I was extremely ambitious my whole life. Very, very driven to work and to do work that I was proud of, which happened most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time. And I was always, what's next? What's next? What's next? And this part of my life, I remember going to a psychic, I don't know, like 40 something years ago, maybe more. And she said to me, there'll come a time when you're not going to feel this way, when you're going to feel like you want to, I wouldn't say slow it down, but be more selective, be more careful, be more cognizant of your time. And I was like, no, that'll never happen. I was so gung-ho to work always. And that has happened. It feels like my time on the planet is very precious to me. And I want to make sure that what I put my energy into is going to not only, illuminate and feed the audience that might get to see it, but also feed me and be a worthwhile endeavor for me, good or bad, but a worthwhile endeavor to put that kind of focus and concentration and hard work into.
Well, I think it's a great freedom that we earn as we get a little older, that we can pick and choose what really we feel is the right path for us. Because when we're younger, we don't always get to do that.
No, not at all. I mean, unless hit a kind of, in my business, hit a kind of superstardom where you do have that choice. The rest of the community, we for the most part, I did get to make decisions that were important to me, but a lot of times not. A lot of times I took jobs for money. A lot of times I took jobs just because I wanted to work again. I was too, imploding, not doing what I do, and those decisions are different today. They're just, different in a very serious way. I have to consider many other things, at this point. I don't want to travel all that much,
Right, exactly.
I want to be away from home. Don't want to be away from my kitties, my husband.
How do you find the actresses and actors today's lives different? I mean, we're going to get into the fact that you were a dancer and that you were Cinderella, but today it just seems like their entire lives are on display, and you either hit it really big or you're fighting just to be able to get a role in. Do you see that as being very different now?
Well, I mean, social media has changed everything, obviously, and the internet, and it was not like that when I was starting at all. When I was starting, I mean, all I ever thought about was my craft, doing the best work that I could do based on the teachers that I had and the knowledge that I had about acting and dancing and singing ultimately, but it was never about being famous. It really wasn't. I mean, my first Broadway show was 110 in the Shade. And I won the Most Promising Newcomer Award that year on Broadway. And I would wait until a lot of the fans had left the stage door so that I could go home. My attention was never on the fame aspect of it. Today, it seems like that is such an impossible thing to not have your focus on because of the internet and social media. I mean, they request for you to now post on social media, and they want to see how many followers you have and all of that. It's very, very, very different. And I'm so glad that I didn't have to go through that, because I think it's an added pressure that if you're an artist type of person, you're not, that's not what you factored into what you wanted to do.
And it seems like there's a distinction now between people who are famous and people who are artists, because you can become famous and not really necessarily want to act or sing. You can just become social media fame.
Yeah,
That's
very different, very, very different. And, I came at the tail end of the studio system. So I was under contract to Disney. I was under contract to Paramount. The contracts, the real sort of, studio contracts. And there was such a different mindset about selling yourself, so to speak. So I didn't have any of that when I was young and coming up, and and for many, many, many years after. And I don't have a judgment for other people, but I'm really glad that I didn't have to go through that.
right. And when we talked to several actors and actresses that were popular, really kind of from still popular, but popular before social media came about, they're grateful that there aren't pictures of a lot of things that have happened in their
Yeah,
lives because there is nothing private anymore.
it's nothing
So,
private. Yeah, it's such a different culture and world. And yeah, I mean, I think that in general, I'm a private person. I'm not interested in writing a book about my life. I'm not, I'm not, and I've had an amazing life and amazing people that I've worked with, and amazing, personal life as well. But I that I always wanted it to be about the work, the work, the work, you know.
so you would never want a personal memoir, but if you could just write about your career, maybe
Yeah, if
that
I could
would.
write about my career and use fabulous pictures. I have incredible pictures with Richard Rogers and, some of the real greats, Mel Brooks, and, on and on and on. That's a different story to me, because then it's about celebrating the
Right.
work, and the relationships in there.
To kind of go back to that time when Cinderella came about, it seemed like your career was very organic. You were a dancer, you were really focused on that, but then you started kind of going to the backstages of theaters. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I was wanting to be a ballet dancer, and I started ballet at 6, and I was very serious about it, and would stand in line to see Baryshnikov and Kelsey Kirkland, and do Standing Room Only when I was 11, 12 years old. And then when I was around 14, and I studied continuously, and then when I was about 14, I had, because it's, believe it or not, it's a small community in New York and Broadway and theater. And I had this friend in school. Her name was Leda Edmonds, and she was in Bye Bye Birdie on Broadway. So she would say, "Come on backstage and come and watch the show backstage." And I did a lot. And I started to get the yen, like, I could do that. I can do that. And I don't know how or why I thought I could, because I'd been a little ballet girl, a bunhead. But I started taking jazz at that time, jazz classes. And I started taking singing lessons when I was about 14. And I snuck off to an audition without telling my parents. And I made up a name. There was a ballet dancer in the professional class where I went to school. Her name was Lesley, and Lisa. Sorry, her name was Lisa, and I picked Lisa for my first name, and Robbins, because I loved Jerome Robbins for my second name. So when I went to audition with 300 other girls, you're given numbers, just like chorus line. And you're in a basement, and they call your numbers and your name. And they kept calling Lisa Robbins, and I forgot. I was like, and finally I went, "Oh my God, that's me." So I went up there, and I auditioned, and it was for Margin Gower Champion, and I got the job. And my parents wouldn't let me take it when they found
Really?
out, because they wanted me to finish high school, and I'm glad they did. Although at the time I was hysterical, and I thought that they had ruined my career. I thought it was the end of my career, and I was devastated. But what happened was, I was at Music and Art High School. I went there for 2 more years, And then I transferred to professional children's school in my last year, which is highly academic, but it also allows you to go to auditions and ballet classes and whatever you're doing. And so I started to audition at that time for My Fair Lady chorus and, you know, different shows. And I finally auditioned for 110 The Shade during my last year of high school. And Agnes DeMille, who is a genius and changed the face of musical theater, was the choreographer, and they had me on, and David Merrick was the producer, and they had me audition over a period of 6 months. She wanted me to go out and learn tap, which I didn't do. She wanted me to, you know, all kinds of extra things that I had to learn. And after 6 months, I got it, and I graduated from high school and went right into rehearsal in the summer. So I was 17 because I had skipped a year in junior high. I went from 7th to 9th grade. So I was very young, very young.
And you also at that time were the youngest person accepted into the actor's studio as well. Was that right before Cinderella or right after Cinderella?
You know, honestly, I don't remember, but it was probably before, because I was 17 and you're supposed to be, I think, at least 18. Mm-hmm. And one of the actors in my acting class had asked me if I would audition with him for his audition. And I said, you know, sure. And so we auditioned a scene from Oh Dad, Poor Dad, Your Mom Has Hung You in the Closet, and feeling so sad. It was an off-Broadway show. Barbara Harris starred in it. And I got in and he didn't.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that the end of that friendship?
That ended that friendship, yeah. And then I started studying. I started with the Actors Studio, but I also went to Lee Strasberg's private classes, which were at Carnegie Hall, and studied with him for the next 10 years in the studio. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you mind sharing with the listeners your story about how you got Cinderella? Because it's such a unique one.
Sure. Okay, so I was in 110 The Shade, and I had a manager, and she had set me up with this audition and for Cinderella, and hundreds of young women were auditioning. And I believe it was in the theater, and I was so scared. I was so intimidated. It was Richard Rodgers, and I grew up in musical theater and carousel. You know, I was so intimidated that I really gave a terrible audition. I was just too scared. And the director, Charles Dubin, had seen me in the show, 110 The Shade, that I was in, and he said to them, please give her another chance. She's just so young. She's so nervous. She's so, you know. So they brought me back, but this time they brought me to Richard Rodgers' apartment on Park Avenue with the choreographer Eugene Loring and Johnny Green, the musical supervisor, and Charles Dubin, the director. And we were in the living room, which was huge. And Richard, Mr. Rodgers, asked everyone to leave. And he had me come and sit down next to him on the piano bench. And he played My Funny Valentine, but sang it, you know, played it and sang it exactly the way he wanted me to do it. And so I just did it that way. And that was it.
That's amazing.
It is
that
amazing.
Would never happen today.
First of all, you can't go to somebody's apartment. I mean, if you all, you know, but it was so innocent and it was so lovely and it was so supportive, and, you know, I felt so safe, and that's why I was able to do that, you know.
That's such an amazing story. And then you get signed to Disney, and you actually were in one of his last movies, right? Walt Disney's movies, which is incredible.
It was definitely his last movie. It was the first action, live action musical that he did, in the last movie that he did. And it was with the Sherman Brothers, whom he always worked with. And that's when I went under contract to Walt Disney in the studio. And it was one of the best experiences ever of my life. You know, it was again a time when you were so protected by the studio system, at least at Disney. And he was so benevolent and, you know, had us out to dinner at his home and in the ranch. We shot also some of the scenes, and the cast was, I mean, to act with Greer Garson, it was just
Wow.
playing my mother. I mean, and Ginger Rogers was in Cinderella. Geraldine Page, who played my stepmother, and I was from the Actors Studio, and she was an icon in the Actors Studio, and, you know, Gladys Cooper and Fred McMurray, whom I just loved playing my dad. It was, and it was such a huge production with so much attention to detail, money spent. You know, it was just an incredible experience.
And then it seemed that they were no longer signing kind of as a family type Disney and Paramount where you would have those contracts. It ended pretty soon after you started that, right?
It did. I did one more film for Disney, but he had passed away by then. And it was an anachronism in a way. It was a film that was very much of a time, but it wasn't matching what was going on in the culture. So it sort of, you know, it was the end of that kind of musical film, which was, you know, very sad to me, but I understand.
During that time, you were so young and you got married, you had your son. What was it like working in the studios during that time for women?
I was such a young girl, you know, I was such a young girl. So I was feeling protected very much in many ways. And at the same time, there were those men who would hit on a young girl, you know,
Right.
and a young, vulnerable, you know, insecure young girl, you know, in some ways. So, you know, it was an interesting combination of having men like Richard Rodgers be so paternal, Charles Dubin be so paternal, and then being at Paramount and dating Robert Evans. You know, so it was like a little bit of bipolar behavior. You know, it was just, I mean, it was so, you know, it was a unique and
It was an experience, right?
experience. Yeah. And he had just broken up with Alan McGraw, and so it was, you know, it was
Wow.
broken up with him, you know. So it was, you know, and I had broken up with my husband. You know, we were it was 3 years into our marriage, I guess. Anyway, so it was, you know, it was those dichotomies existed hugely. You know, I remember going to. There are some stories I can't tell, but
Oh, darn.
Yeah, I know. But
there goes that book
very,
again.
Very famous, let's just say very, very famous mogul type people.
Mhm.
I was invited to a party at their house, and I came there and nobody was there but me. And I kept saying, well, where is everybody? You know, and this person said, they're coming. You know, come sit with me in my screening and I want to show you something. And, you know, he showed me whatever latest movie he was doing, but then he, you know, was groping me and, you know, all this. And I was panicked and,
Wow.
you know, got out of there. You know, I did get out of there. But that duality of feeling taken care of by some wonderful people, and then the absolute opposite, you know, totally existed. Absolutely.
It's a shame because I don't think now with the Me Too movement, women are somewhat more inclined to speak up, but there are so many stories like that that aren't being told from before.
Oh yeah, I was afraid to tell anybody. I mean, I don't think I told anyone. Maybe my agent, maybe, you know, but I was afraid. He was so powerful. And the good news is I got out before it was too
Thank goodness.
invasive. Yeah. But that happened so many times, I don't even want to tell you. You know, I mean, so many times.
It's
so
just,
young.
I hope that it's somewhat changing, but
I think it is.
You think
I think it is. Yes, I do. I think too many powerful men have lost their jobs and their reputation. And, you know, I do think it absolutely, you know, there are, now when you walk on a set, there are, you know, signs about sexual harassment and what is okay and what isn't. And you have, you know, trained people on sets to navigate the love scenes and, you know, all of that. So I think I mean, I think probably it will always exist to some degree, you know, but I think women are much more savvy and much more capable and have, you know, the movement behind them when they're young that didn't exist when I was young, didn't
Right.
exist when I was starting, you know.
It was all secret, but that's
It
hopefully
was like,
changing.
yeah,
Then there's Victor Victoria, which I
yeah.
was surprised to hear that you did not like your performance in the very beginning.
Well, I'm, you know, everybody that knows me says that I'm the worst, you know, the harshest critic of myself ever. You know, I was shocked. I just was shocked when I first saw it. It was at Blake's house, Blake Edwards' house, and the whole cast was there. And everybody was, you know, screaming with laughter, and I was just mortified. I was like, what have I done? What have I done? This is the end. This is the, you know. And I went to my car and I cried for, you know, hours and 4 hours. And it wasn't until I went to a very big screening with my agent, who was Ron Meyer at the time, at the Schubert Theater, which no longer exists, but it was a huge, huge screening, red carpet screening. And I was, everybody was, you know, laughing and applauding the number, and, you know, and I thought, I'm wrong. This
Thank
is a great
goodness.
thing, you know? Yeah, but it takes me time always. My first inclination is like, oh, you know, and then I just sort of work my way back into. It's very hard to see yourself blown up that, you know, in those days, to, you know, that degree, 40-foot screens and 40-foot screens, and, you know, and in ways that you don't see yourself in life, and not be shocked, you know.
And you obviously were getting so many accolades with nominations. Were you surprised? Were you too young to realize that you were getting all these, or were you really surprised each time you got one?
Oh, I was definitely surprised. I was shocked. I knew that MGM was doing a campaign for me. I saw the ads, and I, you know, but I had never thought, as opposed to some people who talk about this, you know, they say, I always dreamed of winning an Academy Award, of being nominated. I never did. I never did.
Really?
I never did. It was always the work, the work, the work, the work. Was that good? Did you like it? You know, I was very, you know, like that. And so that when that all happened, you know, I was ecstatic and shocked, as opposed to when I got the Theater World nomination, award when I was 17. I was too young to take it in. I was too young to take it in. You know, I now knew what this was all about, and, you know, I was 35 or something, I think, something like that. You know, and so I was thrilled, obviously thrilled.
And surprised because you didn't even want to see yourself on screen the first time.
Right. But by that time, I was loving it. It took, you know, I don't know, 6 months or whatever, but no, yeah.
And, you know, doing films with Blake Edwards and Mel Brooks and all these, I mean, the movies you have been in, the casts have been incredible. And I don't think people even realize how amazing these casts were. What was it like on set with these amazing people?
It was fantastic. I mean, first of all, Julie is an angel. Everything everybody ever says about her is true. She is a warm, generous, fun-loving, loves to laugh, you know, beautiful person. So, and I adored Blake. I adored him. And first of all, Blake in those days didn't believe that people could be funny after 8 hours. So our day was 10 hours. We had 2 hours of hair and makeup, and then we would have 8 hours of shooting, because he thought people got tired and they weren't as fast with their responses comedically. So he kept the day to 8 hours. And so that was an incredible, you know, gift. And every day at 4 in the afternoon, because we shot in England, this tea trolley would come around with teas and, you know, pastries and things and whatever. It was very civilized. It was very, it was just, you know, working with them was again, it was just definitely one of the highlights of my life.
Wow. And what about
Yeah.
Carol Burnett? I can't even imagine working with Carol Burnett. Was that just an incredible gift?
Yes. And I was so young again when I did that. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I think I was still married to, so I was probably like 21 or 2 or something like that. And I recently saw that clip because someone sent it to me or they posted it or something. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe, because along with my, you know, rabid desire to work and my sort of incredible need to work and to do what I do, I always had a huge package of insecurity. So it wasn't like I was, you know, confident and, you know, but something in me was stronger than the insecurity that propelled me forward in every situation. And when I saw that clip, I thought, how did that little girl, how did she have all of this apparent confidence and right there with Carol doing that number and, you know, being an equal, at least in that number. And, you know, and then the number with the boys and stuff. I was, because I know backstage what I was feeling. It's kind of, I always say to younger actors that talk to me, you know, truly this was my destiny. Truly it was. It was clearly my destiny, regardless of how scared I felt, regardless of how insecure I might have felt. Nothing stopped me.
And does it seem like you're almost watching a different person when you're on the screen?
Yes, in a way. I mean, I can recall and recollect every single moment of the whatever, you know, and I'm watching. But in the same vein, it seems like you did all that, Lesley. You did it. You know, it's like I can't quite, I have to sometimes sit and take it in. You know, I think it's really important to take
I
in
agree.
what
You
we've
should
accomplished.
appreciate, it seems like you did appreciate every moment, but what a wonderful history to just be able to pull from whenever you just
Yeah.
want to think about that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And you've done a lot, you know, you've been on Broadway and you've been in films and you've been in TV. Is there one genre that you like or you prefer, or do you just love the work? It doesn't matter if it's a big screen or small screen.
It doesn't matter to me if it's big or small. I love film the best, but that's slowly leaving us, you know, but it's what I love the best. My favorite thing is always to work with directors that I'm excited by, challenged by, that I respect. And that's my, I'm always saying, who's the director? Who's the director? You know, that's my raison d'etre, you know. That can't always be the case in television. A lot of times you don't even get to meet the director until the day you're on the set, you know, and they're so worried about the getting it in on time. And, you know, there's so many other factors that they're dealing with that it's not a director actor relationship in the way that I love it. And I would say that, you know, as I've gotten older, theater is less, for the most part, unless it's a limited run, I don't want to leave home for a year. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to relocate in that way, you know, and it's exhausting. You know, it's exhausting to do that every night. But if it's a limited run, then I feel excited and hopeful about doing something like that again.
So it's not off the table. It's just with certain
No.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Is anything off the table, honestly, when it comes to acting? Is there something you would not do again?
It's really hard to say. I mean, I honestly, I feel like I wouldn't want to travel for long periods of time like I used to when I relocated to England, when I relocated to New Zealand to do a movie, when I, you know, for months and months and months. I don't think that I want to do that, but I know me, and I know if it was, if it was something that was, you know, thrilling and there was an exciting casting director, you know, I would probably do it somehow. I'd figure it out.
Was Will and Grace as much fun on the set as it was to watch as someone who was just an absolute fan? Was it as much? Did they contact you and say, hey, do you want to come on Will and Grace? And how'd that come about?
They did. Max Muchnick, who's one of the creators, called me on the phone and said, and I hadn't known him before that, you know, And he said, look, I have this idea for a role and I can't tell you anything about it except she's got a funny laugh. Do you want to come do it? And I was a huge fan of Will and Grace, like so many people, everybody. And I said, yes, without having any idea what the role was. All I knew was that she had a funny laugh, and so I had to create that laugh and I had the best time. I mean, my favorite part of that was watching Megan and Sean rehearse. It was
They
so
seem so in
inspiring.
sync at all
Oh
times.
my God. They certainly appeared that way to me, in rehearsal. I mean, they fed off each other. They're both comic geniuses. And watching them create from a script on the page what they created physically and, in all ways was just magic. I loved watching them. And I loved doing the show. It was just a great group of people. No one's better than James Burrows. I mean, it's just great, it just couldn't be better.
And I know you've mentioned that having a dance background that actually helped you with physical comedy.
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely. Yes,
did you find that on the set too?
All sets, with Mel Brooks on Life Stinks and Victor Victoria. I mean, in pretty much everything that I've done that has a real strong comedic, feel, I am having such a connection to my body, with my body, knowing how it works, and just having an intuitive sensibility about my body and how I can use it to infuse characters has really, really helped me. Yeah, and it's given me freedom. I have a kind of freedom that, if you're trained and do work from the head, neck up, which is a lot of television, you don't get to have that experience, So my training as a dancer really paid off in comedy for me.
How have you found the aging process in Hollywood? Do you think that there are enough roles representing women over 50?
No. It's interesting. I mean, I would say between 50 and 65 or 60 or, it's really rough because you haven't transitioned yet, emotionally or psychologically or visually into the next phase of your working life or personal life. In that way, you're still struggling with all of that, and at least for me. And then you sort of, or I did anyway, you either choose to work on that or you are off getting a whole lot of fillers. You know what I mean?
Okay,
and
yes.
you either choose to work on that issue or you're going to be a slave to that issue. And I wanted to work on it. I wanted to find my way, into another chapter and somehow embrace it. Is it easy? No. Is it hard? Yes. Especially when you've grown up on film. When you've seen yourself at your most glorious, for much of your life, it's really hard and it's painful. And you have to negotiate that, and as far as the roles go, there are many fabulous actresses in their 60s and 70s now. We've all sort of aged up together, and they're great. And there aren't that many great roles. So that's I don't think that I see a lot of foreign films. I go to a lot of foreign films. I always have. And in France and in Italy, and it seems that way in Spain, they know how to use older women in a multidimensional way. Whereas a lot of times in America, the roles can be limited in their complexity. So you're a shrew, or you're an alcoholic, or there are some for sure, but there's not a full-bodied approach to older women, I think, in our.
Do you think maybe that they just don't know what to do with us? Because this is kind of the first generation of women who are still very vital and active and want to
Yes.
work.
Yes, I think that's right, absolutely right. I think, it used to be you hit this age and you're a mom in the kitchen, or you're, yeah. So I think that's absolutely true. They don't know where to put us,
Exactly.
for the most part. And again, there are many wonderful roles, but there are many, many wonderful actresses. So it becomes a narrow path for a lot of us.
When you had mentioned navigating the age, do you have some suggestions? Because we hear a lot from our listeners that I'm stuck in the past. I don't know what to do now that my life is changing and I don't know how to
Yeah.
embrace that. It's a mindset. Would you have any suggestions for our listeners on that?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of emotional work, and in my case, I'm very spiritually inclined, not religious per se, but so, and I think it's very, very individual. I think each of us have to sort of navigate that in a way that works for us. I love the past. I celebrate my past. I love watching TCM. I do. I love old movies. And at the same time, I'm sort of very current, I think. My new mantra is when I look in the mirror and see something I don't like, it's like, whatever. you know in other words,
You mean like the teenagers that go, whatever?
yeah, exactly. I mean, I see, oh, and then I go, whatever, that's the way it is. There are things that I can't change, that I can't change. And I may not like them. I may not like the fact that this is happening, that gravity takes a hold of all of us, but I choose to try to accept it and embrace the life I have, be grateful for what I have, be grateful for that. And I really mean that, I mean, it's not just sort of platitudes. I really mean that. I'll make a mental gratitude list of what I have. And I don't want the last however many years I have to be infused with pain and suffering to the best of my ability. I want to be, enjoying and embracing. And, sometimes I take a walk in the morning for 2 or 3 miles, and, I just am cognizant of, I can do this. I can still do this. And I have a body that works in a lot of ways to my advantage, and my health, and all of that stuff. I really, now for people I know, for me, I continue to want to work as an actor. I want to, I'm going to be producing this other movie, and it's been an enjoyable and exciting new venture. I don't, but I would imagine that for somebody who maybe doesn't have a clear path that they continue to be on and want to be on, that would be very painful and difficult, to find yourself. I know the months that may go by that I don't work, that I'm not working, they're still hard in some ways to create things that give me. I'm a big reader. I love to read. I'm always, my favorite thing is going to the bookstore. It always was from the time I was little. Going to the library, so finding things that still bring me joy and mental stimulation, physical stimulation. Those are the things I focus on when I'm not doing my day job.
Focus on the fact, you made such an important point that you have a body that is moving and physical. And I think a lot of times our mind kind of shifts when we're exercising. When we're younger, it's all about how we look and do we fit, but now it's about feeling healthy and
Absolutely.
Really, mentally it helps, physically it
Yeah.
helps. So
hey, I have a trainer that I work out with twice a week, and the rest of the time I do cardio and stuff. But we were talking the other day, and I said, what I really like about her is she's not I don't want to leave it at the gym. I want to feel healthy and strong as long as I can. And that's my goal. It's not to look, it's not to, all this stuff. It's not, I can't, there's too much I can't control now. And I don't want to beat my head against that wall,
That's so important. That's a great place to end. And I appreciate it so
You're
much that you
welcome.
came on. I would love for you to come back when you're done producing and talk about your new movie that you can't talk about right now. But absolutely love to talk
Thank you.
about that. We appreciate your time so much. And I thank you. And
Welcome.
just, you are just one of those women that we look to say, yes, look at her. She is just kicking butt and enjoying life. And thank you for that, because you're a great example of what should be out there in the
Well,
media.
thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Well, lovely to talk to you.
You too. Thank you so much.